What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 5 of We're Jabbin. My name is Kenji. I'm a product designer, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Licheng, a UX researcher. How's it going, Licheng?
Wow, it's better. Except that I only slept like 3 hours yesterday, thanks to the flu shot I took like 2 days ago.
Yikes! But are you better now? Yesterday meaning like 24 hours ago.
24 hours ago, yeah. So a lot better. But for a moment, it gave me a panic attack that I thought I got COVID. So like, I don't think that's COVID because right now I'm completely fine. So, but don't use these words against me when I actually got COVID or something down the road. So I hope I didn't get COVID.
Good. I hope you don't have COVID either, obviously. If I wish COVID on you.
I will update every guest in this podcast.
So what's going on? What do you want to chat about today?
So today, I think I'm going to take over because I want to talk about, I know, right? How do you feel I take over? I want to talk about, because the last time we talked about research, right? So I basically talked about the common myth or things that we thought would be true, but turned out to be not true. Be as a user researcher, UX researcher, product researcher, like whatever those names are in the industries. So yeah, I have a really, really long story about names, and I hate it. But either way, so I want to turn that to you today, particularly about design and you as a designer and about who you are. And the reason I want to do that is because, like, I don't know if you agree with this assessment or not, but the generation we're in, we're all millennials. And don't ask how old are we. I'm not going to tell. I don't know about Kenji, but and also Gen Z. There's a general assessment about us that stop it.
Wait, because you said that every episode, and then every episode I say, "Oh yeah, Licheng, you're 30."
Oh my God. Okay, I have to quit the show now.
Anyway, go ahead.
Oh God, I hate you, Kenji. I love you, but I hate you. But either way, so what I'm trying to say is that there's a general assessment. I'm curious about your thought too, that we care about our work. We want to do meaningful work, right? We don't want to just do a work that just like, pay the bill and this, and that's it. We want to do meaningful work. We want to have a self-satisfaction, have self-realization, right? So that basically what it's saying is that work is very personal for us, right? So, choosing what kind of career is a very personal decision for us. So for a lot of millennials, at least for me, that's the case. So that's what I want to talk about. That what about design that really touches your soul, that make you want to become a designer? And I think talking about this will really help our potential audience too, about choosing design as a career, or if people wondering about like, am I going to be a good designer? So here's the question. Being a UX or product designer, what enjoyed the most, and what about design that touches your soul?
I feel like this is such a deep question.
I know.
Just kicking it off early, and we must say that we're recording this not on our usual Wednesday, but on a Saturday morning. So we're starting off the day with some inner reflection. I feel like I got to go meditate first for 30 minutes.
And burn the sage. Have that sound as a. Go ahead.
Yeah. What about UX or design touches my soul? There's a lot. I think I touched on this a little bit last episode, right? So for me, what drove me to design was when I was at business school, I was doing my MBA, and it was very much like you're taking these accounting classes, or you're doing this networking, and there's like a direct line, there's a direct end goal, purpose of this business. It's like very focused, or business school. It's like very focused on like you're switching careers, or you're trying to like go to work at McKinsey or some consulting firm. And I don't know, that wasn't quite as important for me. I mean, like I wanted, of course, to do well in my career, but I also wanted to seek something that was like really, maybe it was like you said, very ultimately fulfilling, and something that like I would lose myself in, right? Like as I was doing it, I kind of experienced whatever that flow state. And so when I started getting into design, it ended up doing the dual degree with joined you at the School of Information, right, and did the HCI program. That's when I started to understand, like, oh, this is really what I like to do. And what is it about touches my soul? I think part of it is that in design, there, and I only learned this like after graduation, really, right? As I started working, is that there's so many facets to design. It's like a Pandora's box. So when people think of like UI, UX design, they kind of think of like, oh, Instagram, you have like pretty design, the visual part of it. But there's so many different aspects. And we've talked about like the psychological aspect, the people aspect, but there's also even just like in the visual aspect of things, you can go into so deep into things like data visualization, form design. Like there's so many different aspects of it that for me, it's like I love to learn and I'm very curious. So if I can go read, say, 4 books on data visualization, it's like it opens up a whole new world. And so I'm constantly with design, I feel like I'm constantly finding new pockets of it that I'm like, oh, I never knew about this before. Like I want to go really learn a lot more about this. And then there's going to be something else but it's still falling underneath like the overall arching world of design.
Sounds like design is almost like its own umbrella, right? Like it's an umbrella of multiple disciplines, which is interesting because like as a person who is not a designer, I thought design itself is a discipline, or maybe to extent that's the case too. It's kind of like a discipline of disciplines.
Yeah, well, with let's say product design, right? Digital product design, it is definitely a overarching. You often hear the term like T-shaped designer, right? So someone who can do some visual design, interaction design, doing also like some user research, maybe not to your level, but like doing enough research to be able to inform designs. There is service design baked in there as well. So there's like so many different routes within this super broad field of product design that you can decide to on your T, right, on the place you want to go deep in, that you can go deep in, basically. Yeah. So it's definitely a umbrella, and it's kind of like every product designer you meet might have a different interest and different like things they're passionate about.
But there must be something different about design as an umbrella that stands out compared to other umbrella of the disciplines, right? Because I'm thinking about finance. I'm sure like it's a bunch of other things that under finance that you can do. So what about design that makes you feel like that's the one for you?
That's the one. We talked a little about this before too. So in my previous pre-design career, I worked in sales, right? So I worked at Yelp. I was doing sales, and I was in that world.
I can't imagine you being a salesperson like Kenji. I really can't.
I mean, I was pretty good at it. It wasn't like I was struggling. I feel, but it's very different, right? Sales was so different. I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. And this is not to bash on sales careers, because you can go into like sales management, and I suppose any career you're going to grow in. But sales, after a certain amount of time, right? It's not a craft. And I think that's maybe what I really enjoy about design is like you can keep honing your craft over, whether you've been in this field for like a year, of course, like young designers, or like 10 years. I feel like there's still so many ways to hone your craft as a whole, right? So whether that's like I'm actually learning about a specific thing, like say data visualization or like presenting charts and graphs, or I'm now going more into like strategic design and thinking about how to like inject design into a company that might be engineering focused, right? I see all those as honing your craft as a designer. Whereas something like sales, I felt like, okay, if I'm just doing the same pitch over and over, yeah, maybe you're going up and you start off with like mom and pop shops at Yelp, and then you're doing larger things, you're doing like chains, but fundamentally I was doing the same thing every day. And I couldn't flex that muscle of like, feel like I'm continuously growing and continuously trying to hone this craft. Or maybe I didn't care about honing the salesman craft either. I would say though, being able to sell is super important. It is a good skill.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Because what I'm hearing here is that I like the word you use, like craft, because I think that's where my impression is about design. Because I relate like say product design or UX design to interior design, to whatever design. There is an end goal of it, and then there is it's an end goal in everything, right? But there is a level of engagement that you have to have with those processes. And what I'm also hearing from your conversation is that there is almost like a attention. Please, correct me if I'm off base. That there's a skill versus mindset. Just like what we talked about last time about research too, right? So, and what you're saying might be wrong. I think the sales people in the audience are going to kill me really soon. Is that sales is more like a skill. You can level up to a point, and then it kind of the growth kind of plateaued, and then as a designer, it sounds like both the mindset or skill, you can always like keep growing, both vertically getting deeper or horizontally getting another side of design. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I think our salespeople on this call, whoever they listen to, would probably be very unhappy with what you said.
Oh gosh.
In some ways,
okay.
I mean, you can still grow. You can become like a sales manager, and you can. There's also what you touched on was interesting because I think it applies to design or any field. Is like you have a craft side of things, like a mindset, and then also like a craft, right? Mm-hmm. So you have like the technical side, so in sales, it might just be like you're a born and bred salesman, right? You're naturally talented at selling, but then also you can practice being better at sales too, right? So with design, it's something similar where I think you have a mindset of things you can grow in, and then also or like explore, and then also the really like tangible craft of like understanding or like getting in Sketch or using whatever tool, Figma, and actually doing like the physical design of things. So there's that double mind. There's that two mindset there. As a similar thing, I was discussing with my buddy who I grew up with, Kevin Costello. He runs the Ranch Mind, a architecture firm out in Phoenix. And so we were discussing, okay, like what do we think makes a good designer, or I guess in his case, architect? There's of course a big overlap here. And so a lot of it is so the four things he pointed out are curiosity, like a visual sense or an eye, right? Technical ability, and then work ethic. So I largely agree. I think for design, that's fairly similar. You can probably put in like an interest in people there or interest in humans, but I think again, that's curiosity. But so 1, 3, and 4, curiosity, technical ability, work ethic, those are things that I feel like you can control as a person, right? You can kind of like decide, hey, how much effort do I want to put in from a work ethic side? How curious I might be? How much I'm going to like allow myself to explore curiosity, not only in a certain field of design, like, oh, I want to go check out the best practices and forms, but also like from a practice side, if I'm doing design, for instance, when I was at Ford Labs, I was doing design for traffic safety engineers. And I would literally sit, Licheng, I was like, hey, I talked to some of our subject matter experts, and I was like, give me your safety handbooks. I want to go read them. And like, I would sit in my bath and go read. I would joke with them, be like, I'm going to read this on the weekend, but actually go read the stuff that like the stuff that they cared about, right? So I think that's a certain curiosity level that is up to the individual designer to hone, but that's super like mindset. I feel like in design is very important too, just in terms of like, how much do you want to embed yourselves in whatever field you're designing for, and also just grow across the design field underneath that umbrella, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Let's drill a little more about into the mindset, because I feel like there's already like 50 books out there probably about like what's the skill you need to practice as a designer, and also I'm curious about your mindset. What do you think like as a person, you make you feel like, oh, right now I'm thinking like a designer, right? So give me an example that you feel like, holy crap, I'm so happy I'm doing this. I'm doing what I'm doing.
Give me an example of you want in terms of mindset?
I don't know. Just give me a story. Give me a time that you feel like I'm so happy that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think when I first got into design, that was my introduction, introductory internship into UX was when I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I was working at I'm still passionate about this company, a company called Propel. They make a mobile phone app called Fresh EBT that lets basically low income Americans track their finances, specifically manage their food stamps. So there's like over 1 million people using this app, and it's a free app. Very good group of people working there. But basically, I hustled my way into this internship, kind of created my own internship because I read about them, stayed in touch with them. I was like just super passionate about like what they were doing and the product they were building. But that summer was, I don't even remember what your original question was, but that summer was amazing for me in some ways. I was working on a project that I wanted to like understand, hey, how can we help folks on our app? So statistics show essentially that like most people who receive food stamps are only able to typically have food stamps run out like 2 or 3 weeks into the month. So that means for the last 2 weeks or so, they don't have food stamps to buy food. So already by using Fresh EBT, like it's just giving awareness and helps people understand, hey, this is how much I'm spending. But like, are there ways we can help them stretch these food stamps longer? So that to me was like a summer where I just was able to dive into this space that I found super interesting. Obviously, you're like working on a product that helps people, but just going food shopping with people and understanding like how are they spending their food stamps right now or going to their homes. And so it was very much like the immersive part of UX that you kind of read about. And that company kind of gave me the leeway to do not whatever I wanted, but like there was a purpose to it, right? Like I was truly trying to understand these folks who are using our app, their pain points, like what their life was, not only on like food stamps, but everything, like their whole context of their life, right? If they were on disability, how many are they have friends that are on food stamps, right? Like you're basically as a designer, and this is more researchy, right? But as a designer, you're trying to embed yourselves into someone's life and like understand what's going on with them so that we can design a good solution for them, or ideally with them too, right? So to me, that's like amazing. It's fun. You get to explore new things all the time, right? So in that case, that was exploring people who are on food stamps and struggling to make ends meet and trying to help them with a solution. So whatever it is, even in my current work at Duo, it's like you're going to explore this security space that is super arcane and hard to understand. But it's like you kind of have to have this curiosity mindset because you're not just designing for yourself often, right? I'm not designing for Kenji Kaneko, a 35-year-old, half Japanese, half Spanish guy or whatever, and right now in Ann Arbor, who is like super tech focused, right? Like you need to be able to go out of that to be able to design well. And it's also just interesting to me. It's like a career to go explore new things all the time and meet new people or new industries.
That's fascinating. And to those people, I think, to those people who just get into UX or heard this word over and over, which is becoming a buzzword, is the empathize, right? A person needs to be able to empathize. So I was curious about if that empathize was you were talking about what you said about curiosity and getting to know people. Because the concept of empathize is that basically allowing us to switch our perspective to become, to adopt the perspective of the person who are trying to serve, which is designed for, right? And in your case, it will be people who are using the food stamp and stuff like that. So that covers what you said about getting to know people and curiosity about, and doing exploration and stuff like that. So I was really amazed by
maybe I just hate. I avoided that word. Not
good. Good.
I really, I don't know, something about the word just makes me like cringe a little bit. It's very overused in design fields.
I agree.
Like, what skills are needed to be a designer? It's like empathy. It's always like, and it's just a word, right? It doesn't really give me, it doesn't mean much to me, right? When you say, oh, like you need, like a designer has to have empathy. It's like, okay, what does that mean? How do I curate that? Like, I don't even know if I have that really, or what is, it's just a word that doesn't really give the full meaning to the word, if that makes sense. There's not like a story. It's just like so trite of like, have empathy. It's like, okay, let me pull out empathy out of my left back pocket. I got it here now, or I'm ready to go out and be a designer, right? It's so like, it's such a weird word to me.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because it's getting misused or like being overly spoken
I
these
think it's
days.
because it's overly used in
Yeah,
my head. Yeah.
I
Any Medium article is just going to be like, have empathy,
empathy.
have empathy, empathy,
Yeah.
empathy, empathy. It's like a cult chant. Empathy, empathy.
And what I find is really disturbing is that some people, I find people misusing that on top of like, saying that too many times. Because like, what does empathy mean, right? So like you said, like, does it mean that we just pity the person who have those, issues? Does it mean we're empathizing with them? Or does it mean that, we just like, aha, like, I know the answer, so I empathize with you that you don't know. So there's a lot of ways you can take the word empathy to almost sometimes it's not a good way of using it. And that's why I think like even if people say they empathize with customer, it doesn't mean they really empathize with the customer. They probably just say that, we understand there's an issue for you. It's up to us. We may or may not do something about it. So, but the empathy or the, getting to know people, be curious about them and switching, actively trying to switch your perspective, thinking in their shoes, that kind of thing is way more meaningful and in depth than just like, we understand. If there is an issue in this thing that people are not happy with, so we're already empathizing our people, no, our customer or stuff like that. So I agree. That word is really, really interesting. And it could be up to the person to practice that. Like,
Everyone probably is a different, in some way. There's a standard Webster's dictionary definition to that, but then everyone internalizes a different definition, I think, of empathy and
yeah.
what that actually means.
Yeah. Let me ask this last thing on this story, because I think this is so different. Like, not many people are are able to have like an experience like that. I assume because I don't like working for social good. Practicing, understanding, practicing your self exploration in terms of skill and developing, mindset of a designer and stuff like that. So, how do you feel? I want to go back to that moment. You're like, oh my God, I'm doing this exciting thing. How do you feel? What kind of emotion you have at that moment?
During that internship,
Yeah, the exciting story you just shared.
I think during that time within my internship, one, I felt like, okay, I knew. So that was going into my third year of grad school so I just wrapped up and I was like still trying to figure out, okay, do I do more design focused career or business focused right after grad school? And I knew then I was like, this is clearly what I wanted to do. So I felt like but it was also a feeling of, I going back to like meaning and career it was a feeling of like, this is fun. This is not even work to me. This is super interesting. It was a feeling of like, I don't know, almost happiness, right? Like I found a career that I really wanted to dive into. And, but also like a feeling of, in that specific case, right? It was a feeling of, hey, this company is building a product that actually really helps folks who technology is never built for. So like, I was motivated to work extra hard. I mean, I work hard anyway, but like that summer, I felt like you could have, if the CEO was like, Kenji, we want you to work on a other project, I'd be like, great, I'll work 80 hours a week. It would be fine. Maybe that's not even like that's way too much and a great way to get burned out. But yeah, I felt more just like, it was a good, I don't know. It's like, it was a good feeling. I found a career that I really liked. And specifically it was working on a product that I was super passionate about and felt like it was helping a lot of people's lives.
I like it. So I'm trying to wrap up this question about like what about design touches your soul, right? So I'm taking a few notes here, and the words I get is you feel happy, you feel interested, you feel motivated, you feel curious, you feel passionate. So folks, if you're curious about UX design or what career you should choose because you want a fulfilling career, so learning from Kenji that when you feel happy, interested, motivated, curious, and passionate, that probably speaks to your heart that yes, you find the right one. So this is that question.
And that being said, I think like not everyone, one, is going to like UX too, or design in general. And also there's a lot of designers who do design and it's like, hey, this is my job. I like it, but I'm not like obsessed with it. I would say that I'm fairly like obsessed. If you ask my partner, she's like, on the weekends, like I'm studying or I'm doing something, like we talked about me reading research on brainstorming techniques. Like these are things I enjoy doing. So not, you don't, it's like not everyone's different, has different takes of like, do you live to work or work to live or that type of thing.
Yeah.
I quite enjoy design. And so this is not, it's not much of work to me.
No, sounds good. Like, yeah, so we all have different take on working. But today is about you. And
that's true.
And also, if you drag them to this podcast, I will do a different set of things. But today you are my guinea pig, so like, shut up.
Thanks.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, no, it makes me happy though, because what we're talking about is that no matter how a career means to a person, either you take it 100 steps back, right? Just treat work as work, or you treat work as a way to a fulfilling life. Either way, it still touches my heart to know that you were able to find those things that in this thing called UX design or product design, and it really worked out for you. And I think that's such a positive signal to everyone. So, but now we're talking about positive, right? So let me tone it down a little bit. So here's the thing we want to have, right? So feeling happy, feeling, we're doing great craft, and feeling creativity being practiced and stuff like that. But working in a company is very different from what it works out in our brain, right? So the ideal version of this job versus, when you actually work as a designer in a company. So that might be different. So I'm assuming. Help me understand, where's the gap for you? What are the things you really want to do, but you have less chances to do? Or there's something you really want to do and you got the chance to do it, for you at your job as a designer?
Yeah, I think every company is not going to be perfect, and including my career. It's like I've been, outside of that internship, then I've been a designer at basically 3 other places, and every place was a little different. You're not going to necessarily get everything at each company. So let's say my first one, my first one after internship, I was working at a startup down in Atlanta, and in that role, it was a SaaS company. And that's like where it was like my first design job. And I was only there for a short time before I came back to Ann Arbor. But in that role, I was getting the first experience as working as a product designer on like a 3-legged stool, part of a 3-legged school, me designer, some engineers, PM, right? And it's like, what I got there was an introduction into the world of product design and an eye-opening of, hey, I have a ton more to learn, right? And just in terms of like honing my craft. So that was like super positive, and that made me like accelerate all my self-learning and how much I want to push myself to grow. But maybe on the job, you're not necessarily getting in design school, right? You have this nice linear process, or you have time to do the full design process. In the real world, in that company, for instance, it wasn't necessarily like that. I didn't have the chance to maybe do as much user research as I wanted to do, or I had to be more scrappy about the user research I did. So that's like an example there. When I was at Ford Labs, my next role, where we were basically a internal agency to Ford, or kind of like an internal innovation firm to Ford, taking on like short-term projects, usually 3 to 6 months, and then switching to another project. I had the opportunity to like do more of the user research and do more like, hey, we're coming to you with a problem, and you're going to go investigate, is this a real problem? And then if it is, go design a solution for it and create an MVP kind of thing for there. So for there, it was great because I was like, oh, I get to, do research. I get to do design from the ground up. And so I can make like my own, like my project that I love there was that project I mentioned, Roadco, which was like designing a safety visualization tool for traffic safety engineers. And it was a lot of fun, right? You're working really close-knit with a team. Downside of that project is, right, it's a kind of short-term engagement. So I'm not seeing something through to the, like, after it's built, after then like Ford takes it back and they go like commercialize it. So you're missing out on something there, right? So not every job is going to necessarily have all the elements of what you look for in design. And then in my current role at Duo, right, very good design culture, get to do a lot of research, longer term like a lot of longer planning of projects compared to something like Ford Labs, which is scrappy and we're going to build an MVP and like lean startup type of style. Duo is more planned out research, think to build type of organization, and also very defined design systems. So you're trying to think through like the UX problems versus like the UI problems. So some ways I miss the times of like Ford Labs where I could create something from scratch. Like you're designing from really the ground up, but it's just different type of challenge at Duo. So every role has been a little bit different for me. And at the same time, it's like kind of pushed me outside of comfort zones or push me to flex different muscles at different times. Like in Duo, I was definitely not the best at like planning, and so I came from like the startup-y. That's my mindset, like startup-y, run fast, go do things, go validate. So that's been a growth thing for me of just like more of the project planning and like looping in a bunch of stakeholders because it's a larger company. And those things aren't taught in our like in HCI program either, or even business school. So it's like every path, every journey has been a little bit different.
Like I think I'm going to hijack this conversation a little bit, which I shouldn't, but I'm going to either way, because this is our podcast, right? So, but today is Licheng's podcast. But either way, I heard this debate since you mentioned about design system, right? So, and you also mentioned about creativity, about stuff like that. So I heard there was a debate, but very high level, not very detailed, but about once a company has a design system, which means that there's probably a process built around a design system, right? Like, okay, so in this situation, you need to use those components. After use those components, you need to go through an audit, right? So a bunch of people come together and review that, did you use those components in the right way? Did you use the color in the right way? And some people said that, like, no, that's really destroying my creativity. I couldn't exert as much as about myself into the design process anymore, because all I'm doing is drag and drop, like in a very high level, right? Drag and drop, like already develop components into the screen or something. So what's your take on that? So and have you ever felt that I wish I could exert more creativity in my work?
I think it depends on what you define as creativity there, right? Like you have, if creativity is creating a form field from scratch every time, then, or, creating your own toggle button or something like that, then the first part is I suppose valid. But when you have a design system, it's not it's always evolving. It's not this. And I love, like, for me, again, this is like a passion area for me of like diving into now learning more about design systems and been reading a lot about them, et cetera. But I think if like design systems, not just like, okay, this is like a flat, like a solid thing that exists. It never changes. And sorry, you have to use these components, right? Like at our company, I'm contributing new components all the time, or not all the time, but when they're needed. And the creativity is coming into the fact of like making the flow that makes sense for our customers, right? So you're using your creative juices there, and you're not using your creative juices to think about, I want to make my palette of grays, and I want to make my palette of our main color, and like those are set. So your brain doesn't necessarily think about that. It thinks about a level deeper than that. So there are times that I miss that, right? Of like, you're creating something from the ground up, but at the same time, like once that is set in some ways, I'm putting it in air quotes because it's still evolving. Once that's set, you can kind of explore more important creative projects in some ways.
Yeah, and I can totally see that it could be a life-saving thing that that you don't need to do a bunch of like toggles like yourself. You can just use it so that you can free up your creativity to focus on something different, like you said, like the workflow, and many other things. So yeah, that's a good stuff. How do I sound like a non-designer talking about design things?
Pretty good. The only part I had a little tip when a little cringe was when you said when you're like, if you're just if you have design system, you just drag and drop, right? Like that's like, yes, that's true. You're pulling components, but you're not just like you're mindfully dragging and dropping. You're mindfully building out whatever it's being built out, right? Designing out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying in a high level.
It's pretty impressive. Still pretty good, yeah.
Oh, okay, sounds good. So, let me try to get to the last question here, which I think it might get us a lot of things to talk about.
Could I wanted to say one more thing on like your question of, hey, what are things that maybe you as a designer would want to do but you can't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of those so for me, I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, right? And there are spaces and fields that I've gone into that my mindset, especially when I was at Ford Labs, because our projects were always changing, was my mindset was always like, I want to pre-learn, if possible, pre-learn. I don't know if that's a real thing, but pre-learn like something so that way if I encounter that, I'm ready for it, right? So like I had taken a workshop about data visualization, and that like threw me down this rabbit hole about like learning all about graphs and charts and stuff like that. I was like, let me pre-learn this so that way if I come on a project that has to do with data visualization or making a dashboard, something like that, like I have the tools and knowledge to be able to do that. And then like my next project was actually that, so it turned out quite well. So, but where I'm going with this is like, there are sometimes you're not necessarily going to be able to pick the projects at your work. So like, even though I love dashboards or I love I'm still interested, like a lot in form design. It's not like I can at a company, it's like, okay, you're going to be always working on this, like the thing you really are interested in at the time. It's not going to necessarily be that like cut and dry. So you might just be working on projects that are just like standard, I don't know, UX projects versus in certain specific fields that you're really like geeked out about at this time.
Yeah, which is interesting because that totally, I think a lot of people at school or about to graduate or think about going to school are gonna have this issue, including myself, like a few years ago, is to choose the career between consultancy or agency versus in-house. And I think like the thing you just described will be a lot of the case for people working at agency, that a lot of times you couldn't choose what kind of project you want to get, and chances are, what you get is what you get, right? Even doing in-house, like
in-house too, yeah, for sure.
You couldn't, but I think the level of control is a little bit higher, perhaps. I'm guessing for people being in-house, but there is, like you said, that if you really care about certain things, and then unfortunately at work you couldn't work on those certain things, or not at the moment you want to work on those certain things, that's going to be a little bit struggle. But to you, this is, since today is all about you and your learning, and I think it will be very helpful for other people to hear about what Kenji do. So how you alleviate this issue though? So for instance, I really want to do that kind of MVP kind of thing, right? But my company is no longer at that phase anymore. Or I really want to, practice me hosting a workshop. I don't know. But, at this point, I have to develop, something else. So how you mold what you need into work, and how do you make the work more, cater to you? Is there any way, or is that even a thing?
It depends. It depends on it depends on the organization, I think, too, right? Like sometimes you might just be, obviously there's side projects, right? So like, I want to do this podcast with you, so we decided to do it. It's not like work is paying either of us to chat about design outside of work. I would say I'm thinking about like my time at Ford Labs, and there were always opportunities, or even at Duo, like there are, and I haven't done it as much in my current role, but like there are always opportunities. If you want to do things, you can kind of do them. So I'm thinking about that time where I was doing all this work on dashboards and charts and stuff like that. And then I ended up doing like a little mini like lunch and learn on that topic because I wanted to teach about it after I like learned, taught myself about it. And I wasn't an expert by any means, but I was maybe had more knowledge than some of the other designers there, at least. So there are still opportunities of like to maybe make your own, if you're super passionate about something, to then try to go teach it or get involved with it. It's kind of up to the person but it also depends on the organization. Some organizations, I assume, might be just be like, yeah, kind of like keep your head down and do the work that we assigned you, right?
Yeah.
But there's going to be times where, for instance, in Duo, like I work on our desktop admin side of things. It'd be fun to work on our mobile app as well, but we have designers working on there, right? So it's going to be, there's a trade-off. I can't just be like, okay, tomorrow I'm going to work on our mobile app, right? I don't have that control of hey, I would love to work on this right now, but I'm working on this other thing.
Yeah. Now, let me turn the question to the next level, which is a little bit more open-ended. What might we do to make those things that you experience more accessible to those people who are interested in UX or product design? How can we help them to also have this feeling that design touches their soul too?
How can we make it's going to be tough to maybe have everyone want to have that curiosity, I suppose. It's interesting what we talked about because I think it was very individual focused, right? It's like on me to go explore or on me to go be curious. So I like that. I like your question because I think UX, and this is not going to answer your question, but the field of product design or UX in general, but UX design to talk about, is very nebulous and hard to kind of get into, I think still, right? You have the social network or you have these things. Everyone knows what like a coder is, right? Like for me, even I mentioned previously, I worked at a tech company. I worked at Yelp. I had sales. I had no idea we had people actually designing the app. I thought it was just, oh yeah, the engineers on level 7 are, building everything and they're also like doing the design. So there's still that not split, but like there's still a lack of good information out there. Even though there's boot camps and there is more things online, theoretically everyone has access to YouTube, so you can go learn whatever you want. But maybe it's the naming of the field that's just so hard to get into. I don't know. There's something that still is, I think, it's a lot easier to understand a programmer versus a designer. And it's even harder to understand, I feel like, what a UX researcher does, right? Do you have thoughts on this? That doesn't answer your question at all. I think that's valid. But
yeah, no. Like I hear you. Like there's definitely a bar of entry. Like in my opinion, maybe not, but like yeah, I think there is a bar. So when we're talking about making those experiences also accessible to who are entering the field, it's going to be very case by case. But how about reframe the question a little bit? So, is there any suggestion you can make to those people who are also trying to like have this feeling that, oh my God, I want to have a career, hopefully that's design that touches my soul? Is there any kind of a suggestion you can offer to them?
I feel like it's like career advice, how can I inspire you to find your calling or something?
Hey, you never know. You may become a life coach, at some point. So
never. I would. Sorry, I'm going to go real quick back to the accessibility thing. I think companies like Figma are doing great things in terms of Figma is free. You can use it for free. You can use it on a Chromebook very cheap. So there are, tech has a lot of huge barriers that prevent a lot of accessibility in terms of diversity issues and stuff like that. I think there is some in terms of accessibility in that perspective. That's how I took the question. Like Figma times a Chromebook at least gives you, like, in terms of economic accessibility, makes it easier to get into than I need a Mac plus Sketch, which is like huge prohibitor in terms of cost and that type of thing. I would say from the career side of things, I mentioned that like it's taken me, I went a super roundabout way right into design of sociology, like you, sociology undergrad, interested in psychology, doing sales, coming to grad school, trying to start my own startup, coming to grad school, finding design in grad school, like luckily, thankfully. Not everyone's going to have those opportunities. So I think, but it's part of it is just testing out things, right? Like it's hard if you're sitting in college and you're trying to think, do I really want to be a lawyer? Do I want to be work in finance? Do I want to work in design? It's like, if you can get internships or you can try out those things underneath in like a real world scenario. I know that's so cliche, or go shadow someone even. Like that's probably a great way great way to find design or any type of career. I don't know if that's design specific though.
I like what you said about like there are parts you can immediately like, do that to get more touches with the discipline of design, right? So like using the tools that the designers are using, and some of them are free, or a lot of them have like a free version or something, so that you can easily pick up. At least start from there. But at the same time, you're also saying that, um, so because the whole my learning from our conversation today is that there's a level of a self-discovery, right? So you got that self-discovery through this journey of like, sociology and sales, and then product, self doing a startup or something. So if someone doesn't necessarily have to go through the entire route that you take, but having a journey of self-discovery, understanding what type of things you are really valuing in your life, and if it happens to be creativity, craft, curiosity, learning, continuous learning, and connect with people, those are the things we just talked about today. If you happen to get to that point, then, design becomes a very natural, next step for them. So, but that self-discovery journey really depends on, different people's cases. But, just saying, if people want to go to Kenji's or like your route, like, right, going to school and then go to sales, like we're dancing around the technology and business, and those disciplines, that might be a way too. So does that cover what
Yeah, I
you
think
want to
so.
say?
And even the words you described, or sorry, the words you use, right? Craft, creativity, interested in people, and like exploration and continuous learning. You can use those words, and that doesn't have to apply to like product design, right? You could
Right.
want to be I think I mentioned before, I think you could apply those to like therapy if you want to be a therapist, or maybe an architect, which is like in the design field, or um, some other, many other fields, right? That doesn't necessarily just apply to design. For me, that's how it applies to like design. I find those in the field I work in, but I probably also maybe could find those in a different field. Like, right, if I don't know, if I chopped off my hands today or my hands fell off and I went blind, like, I'd probably still like those things. Could I do those in a different field where I didn't have my hands or my eyes to do those in as a digital designer? Maybe. That I went an extreme route.
Well, like that's true. Nothing's definite, and I'm a firm believer that, a lot of things are not repeatable. So even if, there is a chance that, I don't know, this is getting really meta, but even if I repeat my entire life journey, I still might end up with some other routes. So you're right. I think like design does, from your perspective, does cover a lot of things we just talked about, like creativity, and stuff like that. But it not necessarily means that that's the only thing and the only option. But what I'm trying to get to, so help me out here a little bit, is that to those people who also, in case they also want to have the same level of, fulfillment, that you're happy you find design that, make you happy. What if those people really want to have, have a similar kind of, feeling too? Is there anything we can do? And that goes back to, I think a few episodes ago, we talked about mentorship, right? So we as a community really want to emphasize on mentorship. Those people who've been through the process want to help people who might be interested in the similar path. And we complain about like our school, UMSI, does not have much of those components, and we want to do a little bit better in terms of that. So anything that you think the future people, oh God, like future people, people who are interested in this similar path of yours, any suggestion for them?
One of the things that I remember, I was actually just talking to him the other day, was I had a friend from my undergrad who went into design, UX design. This was still during I had no idea what that really meant. But when I came to grad school and I was like, okay, I'm starting to explore this field. Like I had someone that I could then go talk to, or it wasn't like a best friend, but I just hit him up and I wanted to like learn more about his day to day and ask him a little bit more, like to understand, like, is this a field I'm even interested in exploring? So, and he obviously talked with me, and we still chat all the time about like design. But that was super helpful, right? Just to have like, oh, there is someone you can go ask questions to, and as a
Mm.
student, or if you're a younger person, whatever, like just phrasing that as going to reach out to somebody who's in the field. I think a lot of people will take time to for like a younger person who's a student to say like, hey, I'm a student and want to learn about like your career path, what design is, a little bit more about like what UX design is. Can we hop on a call? um, I feel like that's a good first step to start exploring any field, whether maybe that's design or not. I don't know if this is getting at you. I feel like in some ways you're asking like, how can we cultivate this passion in others for design? And
Because like,
some of that is like you can't, right? Sometimes you can expose people to fields, and I think that's what where
mhm,
design can do a better job of, like exposing this to more people, so that way it's just as much of a career path as becoming a lawyer, for instance, where
mhm,
people are not passionate about their work for the most part, like 50% of lawyers.
yeah.
So part of it's exposure, but then part of it is just like, does this field resonate with the individual personally?
I like what you said about like, can we how can we be known that, okay, so let me reframe it. So because I like what you said about, are we cultivating a culture, right? So in a way that maybe we should, um, or maybe we shouldn't. It's really up to individuals. It's a self discovery journey, right? So, but at the same time, I think about my past experience when I'm not very
Hmm.
sure. Should I go to UX? I have this struggle, and I think many people shared that with me, that I have an interest, but I don't know it's a time thing. Is that I'm only interested in that for that time, or I'm really deeply passionate. I'm passionate in this, and I'm so torn because if it's a timely thing, I don't want to invest in it because this go me down the down the road of having a bunch of student loan going to school and whatever. That's very costly, right? At the same time, if I miss on this thing that might touches my soul, I'm missing a huge chunk of my life. So there's a stake at there too. So how do I know? Like, I'm this kind of person. I might be somewhat interested in creativity. I mean, somewhat interested in, understanding people, somewhat interested in, crafting. But how do I know? Like, this is going to be a good career for me. So that's why what I'm saying that, hey, you as a person who actually find the answer, yes, that's the career for me. I'm so happy I'm doing this and it touches my soul every day, well, hopefully every day. Is there any way that
Maybe not every day
maybe we can
either.
talk about but like, so I was wondering, is there any way we can do? This is me purely being interested in that, we've been through that struggle. Is there anything we can help other people to at least find some clarity? It doesn't mean that, yes, you are interested in design. That's not the answer we're interested in giving them. But hey, if you thought about this, that might give you to a better answer if you are interested in design or not. So that was what I'm trying to get to. But you're right. This is so vague, and this is so like case by case, situation.
Sure.
And I like what you said, that finding one person to talk to who are already in the field as an
Or
anchor,
yeah,
or
or a few people. It doesn't have to be
or
one. Yeah, it could be. Yeah,
right, right, right,
yeah.
right, right, right. That was the concept that, finding some anchor in this exploration will help them to go through this process. So I think that's a very solid one because at that time, at least when I start thinking about UX, I never did that, and that's why probably why it took me so long to figure out that, yeah, maybe this is a good career for me, and I'm very glad I chose it. So anything else, just in case that we miss anything?
But it sounded like what you were saying, though, there is like an inflection point of you're
Mm-hmm.
doing something, right? When I started out doing off design in UMSI, I wasn't like, oh, it wasn't really super clear. Just the more I did it, then I
Mm-hmm.
started seeing, oh, and started more I dove into the field. Then my eyes started getting wider and wider and wider and wider until it was
Mm,
like my eyes are permanently, like, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going down this path. So you understand, I think, after a while of doing something, whether that's an
mm,
internship or even longer, but there's like after a certain point, people can figure out, oh, is this what I want to do? Is this kind of like, or am I not quite as interested? Right. Like did a product marketing internship. I was like, this is nice, but it wasn't like I was like jazzed to like wake up and go to work every day. Or when I was doing sales, I did that for 2-3 years. I was like, I was good at it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it. So it's like as soon as once I found that thing that I was enjoying, I was like, I'm going to invest 100% in this and try to become basically the best designer I can be. And that's probably why you always hear me like, I'm buying this course or I'm reading this, because I'm like, I found this thing and I'm like, nothing I want to get in the path of it, basically. That might be totally crazy, but that's how so I feel like once you find that thing for you of, hey, I really like this, I want to invest 100% into it, then you can just kind of like go from there. And there's going to be struggles along the way. And for me, there might be more career changes in the future of like, I might outgrow this part of design and move into a different part of, place in the tech sphere or outside of tech. Who knows?
I learned 3 things from talking with you, like especially around like, what about design touches your soul, and how did you find that discipline of called design that actually touches your soul, right? So we're talking about like doing a quick recap before
I like this.
Previously on this episode, that you know about yourself, that creativity, you want that exploration, you want that continuous learning, so you understand yourself and especially certain quality you want to accomplish. And secondly, you really make sure yourself focus on those points, and then constantly practicing make you a better designer every day. And at the same time, you'll reach out to people, so that serve as a kind of anchor, like to navigate in this kind of exploration in the earlier phase. And the last one, I really like what you said about connecting dots, because that really reminds me of the famous Steve Jobs a commencement speech in Stanford in 2005.
Every episode, Steve Jobs obligatory mentioned by Licheng.
Exactly. That's what I got a commission from Steve Jobs, like for sure. Like because that he talked about exactly the same thing, that dots can only be connected backward. You won't know like how to connect the dot, like look into the future. All you can do is that at every single moment, you focus on something and having a faith that when you look back in the future, those dots will be connected and point you to the direction or career that really touches your soul. And that's the advices that he gave to Stanford graduates at that moment. How do you find a career that's meaningful, fulfilling, by having this faith that there is something waiting for you down the road, and all you need to do right now is focusing on things that really matter to you. For you, Kenji, that's the creativity, craft, exploration, learning, and stuff like that. So I think that really give a really nice story about the episode today. We learn a little bit about you, how you get there, but also we have a little bit takeaway for people who want to have a similar feeling that, wow, I have a fulfilling job. So hopefully that wraps up this episode, and let's go to our weekly what the heck's going on with us. I can start because
go ahead. Yeah, I talked a lot this episode, so go ahead.
No. I finally have a breakthrough. I finally finished unpacking at my apartment, and I prove you wrong, Kenji. You said 3 months later I'll be still unpacking my apartment. Finally, I finished more or less this week. And also continuing from last month, what we're talking about, that I'm trying to plan design sprints, and because of COVID, it has to be remote. I have to say it's very, very difficult. It's way more work than I imagined.
Have you found any good resources or anything to help with that?
Yeah, like I still using the Jake Knapp book. That's still a very good foundation. But at the same time, I also separately looking at how to hold workshop remotely. Well, any kind of remote suggestions too. I'm trying to combine them too. And I have to say, like, they change a lot of the structure that I have to do for the design sprint. I'm still planning, but for instance, how many people that we should include as a small decision like that, right? How many people we should include in a design sprint? Jake Knapp suggested 7 because they figured out that more than 7 is slow the conversation down tremendously. Now that effect will be way bigger at remote, right? So chances are, if there's 7 people, you have to do a lot of good practices to make sure everyone have an equal voice, because it's so easy in a remote setting to have 1 or 2 people become the dominant voice. Yep. So how to make sure that happens, and that includes restructuring the exercise every day and stuff like that. And then collaborative tools, now like we want to do brainstorming. Should we take a picture and upload it? Where should people just draw on the screen? Like, it just like got really, really a lot of decision points that I have to make. So I'm still making progress on that, but I would say that maybe it's going to be a future of a lot of work we do as UX professional. That more people being remote, and then people prefer to be remote. And by default, a lot of activities have been adopted. So I'll be happily reporting back by the next episode. Probably I will make way more progress. But it's
great.
just
when is the actual workshop or the remote sprint's going to kick off?
Yeah, in 2 weeks. So, but see, again, like remote, right? So if we couldn't decide on, I need to input and buy-in from my teams too, right? About how many people. But once they determine on how many people and who are they, I have to convince their head or their department that they should block off a whole week for me. So it's a lot of negotiation there. So that's why even I have 2 more weeks, I still feel like I don't have enough time. I feel like there's so many things need to be done before that kicked off. So if I died or had anxiety attack, like it's probably because of this. Very dramatic.
I hope you don't die from running a remote sprint. If you do, that's some major issues. But I have done a couple. We talked this a little bit off this, but I have done a couple remote workshops. It's much tougher for sure. You have to really prep, really think through like the exercises, think about breaks. There's so many different aspects that don't allow for that like improvisational element. I feel like that you can do in person. It's a lot harder.
And I think like sprint is so intense. It's kind of the same concept of like a remote workshop, but tuned up by 100%. Because every day there's a different agenda. And it's a full week. It might not be 6 full hours, but if that either that's a 4 hours or 5 hours, you decide to do it. But that's a continuous full commitment. That is way harder than say like half-day workshop or full-day workshop. That's just a one-time thing. So, and what is even worse is that I have a feeling that there might be follow-up sprints after this sprint too. This is my guess, but I don't know yet. So I need to be mentally preparing for that too. I'm like, holy crap! Like if this keeps happening, then I might just like need to drink more coffee, at work. But you plan day 1. Day 1's schedule is very different from day 2, from day 3, day 4, day 5. And then you have this interesting thing, right? Say day 4 is typically saved for prototyping, right? So if that's a completely remote, holy crap, like if people are not familiar with the prototyping, like that's going to be a beast on its own. And then I was brainstorming with my team, and let me know how you think about it. I actually think about it in this setting, it might not be the best case that everyone prototype, and then at the end of the day, we stitch them together as a full prototype. I might just want to have a designer do as the point person, so that I can, be more effective. Because just remotely doing prototype on its own, and people not familiar with the prototyping, have questions about use the tools, and then, blah, blah, blah. I just don't know how well that will work. So what's your thought on that, though?
So day 4 is prototyping. Typically, is it, you guys are creating in the typical sprint, they're creating one prototype as a group, right?
Yeah.
And then they're going to test that with users on a Friday. I wonder what if there's some sort of like day 4 is used for solution in general. And so you have people that you take like individual time to create a solution. And then maybe that's like part the first half of the day or like first early part of the day. And then you have some time after that to come back as a group, present those individual solutions and like pick out or dot vote on ones that worked well or parts of elements that work well. And then morph those into like either one or two solutions to then prototype on day 5, or even just like take one of those solutions and have like a designer or somebody else like run with that a little bit and like maybe make it a little bit higher fidelity. Or take like they might have to do extra work on that Thursday to take those concepts and ideas that the group made up to then make into like one solution.
We're thinking about on a similar thing, because like what you mentioned about like solutioning, narrowed it down, right? So that was day 3. So what I plan to do, and day 4 is supposed to be like supposed, quote unquote, in person, that full day prototyping, because everyone got a prototype, right? But you're right. I think that's not going to work well in this kind of setting. I need to find a point person. So I'm thinking about making the designer in the workshop as more like a point person for design the prototype. And then what we can do is at the end of day 3, we narrowed it down to 1 or 2 prototype we really want to test, and then produce a workflow or a storyboard so that the designer can easily start to prototype on the day 4. And everybody are free to observe, ask questions, contribute ideas, but they're no longer forced to produce a prototype. Because like I participated in one of the design sprint previously remotely. Holy crap, that went really badly. That would everyone feel like I need to prototype, and a bunch of product team members, like, oh, God bless their heart, like they're so curious, but they're just like, I don't know, I really don't know, and they're like, because at that time we use a PowerPoint to prototype, right? And then they're just not really good at that, and then it's just a painful process on both sides. Because one, we have a time pressure that you have to finish something and in a reasonable quality, right? And other people are just like, where to do this? How to click on this? How to use that? What do you mean by interaction? So, and then it becomes this mess that we didn't finish on that day. So I think that maybe having more structure in the remote setting might be helpful. So I agree with you. Maybe have a 1 point person might help the team. But I still want the team to see how prototype works. How do you get to the prototype process?
I think as long as like the designer has a good sense by end of day 3 or even beginning of day 4 of like, okay, this is really the prototype we want to create, rather than like, rather than having them trying to synthesize and create, right? And then you can go at some point, maybe like towards the end of the day, bring it back to the group or whatever it is to have the group, like, I'm trying to think of like having the group be part of that. You mentioned like them watching that process, but maybe it's like they've already basically created the solution in day 3 in that flow, and the designer's kind of just like making it a little bit better, and then they can like still be involved towards the end of the day, maybe give some feedback, and end of day 4 give feedback and things to change before day 5 for user testing.
Sounds good.
Yeah, this is exciting. I would love to hear more on or discuss later podcasts.
Sounds good. I will report back. How about you, though?
Okay. Let's see. This week, well, we have. So I'm reading it, but like I'm always reading different books. I'm not going to talk about the book I just read, although it was very good. I feel like I'm always just giving book recommendations on this podcast. I'm going to point out 2 things I'm excited for. One, I signed up for a form design masterclass that's in January with Adam Silver. Adam Silver worked for like the government of UK government, so he's very much in tune with like inclusive design, accessibility, accessible design, and is like a kind of form design, I guess, expert. He wrote a book on it as well. So super pumped for that. That's coming up in January.
Nice.
I don't know. I love forums for some reason. Other thing that is exciting is it's your birthday coming up next Tuesday, which also happens to be the election. So that should be a very interesting night where we're going to get together and and do something for your birthday, of course. And hopefully it's good news on the election night too. We'll see. You can interpret that however you want.
I'm gonna prepare some booze, for sure.
Yeah, probably necessary. Well, we'll be celebrating your birthday, so it's either way, it's a win. We'll we'll celebrate your birthday. That's happy time. If Biden wins, I'm putting this out there. If Biden wins, then it's double happy time. If it's your birthday and Trump wins, then it's happy and sad. So maybe they negate each other. Just okay time.
Oh my god, my prayers. Oh, I am gonna have an anxiety attack soon. But this is just like I know like election is written in. Is that in Constitution like the day? Well, whoever is in the law, but whatever. But this year, I'm just like curse everyone. Like I'm like, why my birthday had to be like election day, and not every year, but this year. So
I guess it must be the first Tuesday, probably the first Tuesday of every November. Not every November, every 4 years, rather than sitting on your birthday. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up then for episode 5. We talked about a lot of things, but thank you, Licheng, for leading this one and talking a little bit about what about design touches my soul personally. And go ahead and if you like our episode, review us on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to our channel. We really appreciate you listening to us every week, and we'll be back again next week.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.